Hey sightseers, Sightseeing Sal here. It is officially October, which customarily I like to check out hauntings and legends during the month of October. Today we are in Riverside Cemetery, which is located in Appleton, Wisconsin, along the Fox River, I believe. And we are here checking out a particular legend or haunting of a young woman's grave, the young woman being Kate Blood. Blood is her maiden name, and this young woman's grave has been the subject of legends and lore for quite some time, people claiming it to be haunted by apparitions and other spiritual encounters. Today we're going to go check that out. We're going to go look for the grave, and I'll share with you the story or the lore behind Ms. Kate Blood, and then share with you the real story, what really happened. What's interesting about Kate Blood's final resting place is that it is actually in a different part of the cemetery, over along the bluff on the river, in a section where it is basically isolated from the other graves. And so this has added further to the mystery surrounding this young woman. However, we know from historical records that some of the stories or legends behind this young woman are simply inaccurate, simply not true. But we'll get into that here shortly. What do people normally think of when they hear the name Kate Blood? Well, if you're from this area, a lot of people seem to believe in one of two legends. Both of these legends sprung up from the mystery or the need to explain why Kate was buried here in this part of the cemetery. The first legend goes something like this. Supposedly Kate was a witch who murdered her family, her husband, and her children in cold blood with an axe. The second legend totally ignores that and focuses in on her husband, George, and people started the rumor that George murdered Kate. Of course, from historical records, we know these legends are simply not true. They are the product of people's imaginations, of trying to explain why Kate was buried in such a remote part of the cemetery. So what really happened to young Kate, to Kate Blood? Well, here's what really happened. When Katie was 23, she came down with tuberculosis, and as a part of her recovery, she traveled down south to be with other relatives. Unfortunately, she only made it as far as Kansas and then passed away. Her body was then transported by train back up to Appleton, Wisconsin, where she was laid to rest in this part of the cemetery. Her husband went on to live a long life. The reason she's over in a section by herself is because she was part of a prominent family here in Appleton. And back in the day when the cemetery was first opened up, this would have been considered one of the prime real estate sections of the cemetery. And so she was laid to rest here out of respect for the things that her family did for the city of Appleton. Now, as I mentioned earlier, George Miller, who was Kate Blood's husband, went on to live a long life. He ended up remarrying, and Mary Moulton Hutchinson is also buried here along with George and Kate. Now, as I alluded to earlier in the video, some people have reported hauntings here in this part of the cemetery at Kate Blood's gravesite. Supposedly, during the night, at midnight, you can see blood dripping from her tombstone. Other people have reported feeling heat or warmth upon touch. As you can see, I'm not the only one intrigued by the legends of Kate Blood. As I was shooting this video, there was actually several groups of people who came down to check out Kate's tombstone, and I suspect that has a lot to do with the fact that Halloween is coming up. Now, do I believe the stories about the hauntings of Kate Blood's gravesite? Well, let me put it to you this way. Paranormal researcher Chad Lewis has looked into the supposed hauntings here at Kate Blood's gravesite, and you know the saying how seeing is believing? Well, he put it like this: believing is seeing. In other words, sometimes people see things because they so want to believe something is true. And so, sightseers, I personally suspect that whatever hauntings or spiritual occurrences have happened here are most likely due to people's imaginations versus really being due to supernatural activity here at Kate Blood's final resting place. And I suspect this is probably one of the most peaceful areas of the cemetery when you don't have the sound of lawnmowers running in the background. Special thanks goes out to all our fellow sightseers here on Patreon and PayPal. Without you, these videos wouldn't be possible.